Hi, I'm Sankha.
And I am Arshita.
In this video, we are going to demonstrate the Raspberry Pi.
A Raspberry Pi is a credit card sized single board computer developed by the Raspberry Pi Foundation in UK. The main purpose of a Raspberry Pi was to teach computers to school children. There are 4 types of a Raspberry Pi: Model A, Model B, Model B Plus and Model 2.
In this video, we are going to use the Raspberry Pi Model V version, which is used by most people. Now, we'll show the components of the Raspberry Pi.
The Raspberry Pi is based on Broadcom BCM 2835 system on chip, which includes a 700 MHz ARM processor, a video core, 4 GPU, and RAM. In Raspberry Pi B model, 512 MB RAM is there.
So, this is the Raspberry Pi Model B version. These are the 2 USB ports. This is the Ethernet port. These are the GPIO pins. There are a total of 26 GPIO pins in a Raspberry Pi.
This is the video out which you can connect to your normal TVs. This is a 3.5 mm sound output which you can connect to your headphones or to the speakers. This is the HDMI out which you can use to connect to your monitors or LCD TVs. So there is a power jack, micro USB power jack, which is used to power the Raspberry Pi. You can use a normal phone charger with an output of 5 volts 700 mAh to power it.
A Raspberry Pi does not have a memory of its own. You have to insert an external SD card here. Now, let us have a look at the components required for a Raspberry Pi B model to run. This is the Raspberry Pi B version. These are the optional components and these are the basic components required to run your Raspberry Pi. This is the power source cable. You connect this end to this port and this end to any power supply source such as an adapter or your personal computer. For internet connection, you connect an Ethernet cable to the Ethernet port of your Raspberry Pi and this end to your router. As I already told you that the Raspberry Pi has no storage of its own, so you have to connect an external storage memory here. This is a 4 GB memory card that we are using. You can also use an 8 GB memory card for better performance. This is the HDMI cable. Coming to the optional components of a Raspberry Pi, this is the Wi-Fi adapter. Instead of an Ethernet cable, you can also use this Wi-Fi adapter for internet connection and connect it here. These are the jumper wires that have to be connected to the GPIO pin. Connect an LED to this end.
So before getting started with the Raspberry Pi, we need to put the Raspbian OS into this memory card. Now we are going to show you how you want to put the Raspbian VZ OS into this SD card.
In order to install the Raspbian OS to your Raspberry Pi, go to raspberrypi.org. Over there, click on Downloads. There, you will find Noobs. Noobs is an easy operating system installer which contains the Raspbian. But in our video, we shall be using the Raspbian OS. So there, you can either click on Download Zip or the Download Torrent. We've already downloaded the Raspbian for our convenience. In the same link, you will also find an image installation guide. Click on the image installation guide and choose the system of your choice.
Here we are using Windows, so we'll select Windows as our choice. Now insert the SD card in your SD card reader. So here we are using the 4GB SD card. Next, install Win32 Disk Imager utility from SourceForge project page. We have already installed it. Make sure when you are running Win32 Disk Imager, run as administrator. Next, select the image file you have extracted from the Raspberry Pi vz.zip file. Select the Raspberry Pi vz.img. We have already extracted it from the zip file. Next, make sure the drive letter of the SD card and the drive letter over here matches. So it is H drive, and over here it is also H drive. Next, click on write. Click yes. Now Win32 Disk Imager will write the image file into your SD card. It will take some 10 to 15 minutes. After the write is completed, you can exit the imager and eject the SD card.
In this tutorial, we'll be using PuTTY. To download PuTTY, go to putty.org. PuTTY is an SSH and Telnet client which we'll be using to connect to the Raspberry Pi terminal. Click here to download PuTTY. Now we'll be using Windows Intel 86 version. Click on putty.exe and it will automatically download putty.exe file. It is a 512 KB file. Also, you need to download VNC Viewer. To download VNC Viewer, search VNC Viewer in Google and click on the first link. Here, we'll be using VNC Viewer for Windows 64-bit. Click on Download. Next, you have to give your name and email address. You can leave other options blank. Click on Submit. After that, you have to click I have read and accept these terms and conditions. Then click on Download. Your download will begin automatically.
So now this memory card contains the Raspbian OS which we installed in this. Now we'll put this SD card into the Raspberry Pi. Next, we'll be connecting the USB port. This is connected to the keyboard. This is connected to the mouse. And also we'll connect the HDMI cable. Here I am using HDMI to VGA adapter. In normal cases you can use a HDMI to HDMI cable. Next, if I power it on, you can see in the display. So the Raspberry Pi is now booting. The first thing you will notice when Raspberry Pi boots up is this kind of terminal. But don't worry, it has a display. But to get the display, we need to configure it first. After booting up the Raspberry Pi for the first time, you will land on this screen. This is the Raspi config screen. Over here, you'll get 9 options to change your Raspberry Pi configuration. The first option is to expand your file system. When you'll put the Raspberry Pi OS into your SD card, there might be some space left unused. Using this, you can use the full file system or the full storage of your SD card. Next is changing the user password. The default user is Pi and the password is Raspberry. Using this, you can change the username and password of the Raspberry Pi. The next option is important as it enables you to choose where you will land after you boot. You have a choice between desktop or scratch and command line. So if you want to use desktop the next time Raspberry Pi boots, go to this and select desktop login. Otherwise, you can also use Scratch. Scratch is a kind of programming language. Scratch is a programming IDE where kids can learn programming. Next is the internationalization option. Over here, you can set up your locale, your time zone and your keyboard layout. Now, I'll set the time zone. The time zone where we are using the Raspberry Pi is GMT plus 5:30. So we'll select Asia first and then Kolkata. So you can see the time is set. Next, we have the option of enable camera. The Raspberry Pi comes with an external Raspberry Pi camera which you can buy separately and connect to it. To use that camera, you have to enable this option. Next is add to RAS track. Using this option, you can track your Raspberry Pi all over the world. Next is overclocking. Your Pi is generally clocked almost around 700 MHz. Using this option, you can turn your Raspberry Pi clock features. Next is the advanced options. Over here, I'll recommend you to enable the SSH remote command line access because it will enable you to log in to your Raspberry Pi remotely using internet connection. So I've enabled the SSH server in it. The other options in the Raspberry Pi are for advanced users. In this tutorial, we are not going to tell you what all these features are. The last option is about the Raspberry Pi config. So it's a tool which sets up the Raspberry Pi. Next, go to the finish, click enter, press yes. So now your Raspberry Pi is going to reboot. So after reboot, your Raspberry Pi is going to open in the desktop mode. So this is the desktop mode of the Raspberry Pi. Over here you can see the CPU usage, and on the other side you can see a menu. On clicking the menu, you can see there are programming, internet, games and accessories. In programming, you'll get Python 2, Python 3, Mathematica, Scratch, Sonic Pi and Wolfram. In internet, you'll get Pi Store. Pi Store is an interactive store where you can download softwares which you can use in the Raspberry Pi. It's similar to the Ubuntu Software Center. Before using Pi Store and other things, we'll first show you how to connect to the internet. Using Ethernet wire connected to your router or using a Wi-Fi module, you can connect to the internet. After connecting the Ethernet cable over here, you will see these three lights will turn on. Now we'll open the browser. Raspberry Pi comes with the Epiphany web browser. So now I'll open google.com. Also, you can open any website in this, and Raspberry Pi is able to handle graphics very easily. Next, you can go to this LX session. This is the terminal of the Raspberry Pi. So now I am going to show how you can use the Raspberry Pi without a monitor. So for this, I'll go to raspi-config, sudo raspi-config. So for this, I'll go to sudo raspi-config. Over here, I'll go to enable boot to desktop or scratch and set it to console, text console. Next, I'll finish it. Like reboot, yes. The system will again reboot. After rebooting, the Raspberry Pi will show the console. So now Raspberry Pi is asking for login. Type pi and the password is raspberry. After successful login, you can see the last login time. Connect your Raspberry Pi to the router. After connecting the Raspberry Pi to the router, power up the Raspberry Pi. Next, open your laptop and connect to the same network. Now, Open the router homepage. Basically, it is 192.168.0.1 or 192.168.2.1. After logging in to the router page, go to the attached devices or DHCP client list. Over there, you will see a device name Raspberry Pi with the IP address. Our IP address is 192.168.2.4. Now, open PuTTY. In PuTTY, type the IP address of the Raspberry Pi with the port as 22. Next, click open. It will open up the terminal of the Raspberry Pi. As we are connecting the Raspberry Pi to the PuTTY for the first time, it will ask us to add the fingerprint. Press yes. Then you have to type Pi, and the password for Pi is Raspberry. Now you are logged in to the Raspberry Pi's terminal. Over here you can run simple programs like a simple Hello World Python program. Type Python space the name of the program. This is a simple program which prints hello. Raspberry Pi comes with inbuilt Python 2 and Python 3. Also, you can build interactive Python games in the Raspberry Pi. Next, I'll show you how you can use the display of the Raspberry Pi and see it in your laptop or PC through the Ethernet connection. In order to view the desktop of the Raspberry Pi through SSH, we need to install PuTTY VNC server. For that, type sudo apt get install PuTTY VNC server. You have to type this in the Raspberry Pi terminal which you have opened in the PuTTY. Now it will install the PuTTY VNC server. After installing PuTTY VNC server, type PuTTY VNC server again to configure the PuTTY VNC server. It will take few minutes to download PuTTY VNC server. Press yes or Y. Now type VNC server. You'll require a password to access your desktop. So beware what password you're typing. Verify the password. Verify the password. Next, press Y in order to your password. After this is done, type VNC server :0 and then dash geometry, the resolution of the screen you want. I'll prefer a lower resolution according to my laptop screen size. After pressing enter, you will see that the VNC server will run. Now, go to the VNC viewer that we already downloaded and run it. Click I have read and accept these terms and conditions and press OK. Next, you have to type the IP address of the Raspberry Pi, which is 192.168.2.4, and after that you have to use :0. :0 is the port we have assigned to the VNC server. Next, press connect.
Press yes to add the fingerprint of the Raspberry Pi for the first time. Next, you will get the desktop of the Raspberry Pi on your screen like this. Now, you can also install Windows 10 IoT on your Raspberry Pi 2. For this, you have to create an account at Microsoft Connect. Then, you have to download the Windows IoT code_RPI2 build.zip, which contains flash.ffu. Place this file in an accessible place. Now, use a blank 8GB class 10 SD card. Open the command prompt and type diskpart diskpart, then list space disk, then exit. This will allow you to find the drive number for your SD card. Finally, follow Microsoft's own instructions for flashing the SD card in Windows 10. After that, safely remove the SD card. The card is now ready to boot in your Raspberry Pi.